Welcome to today's Roundtable webinar, brought to you by Verint and Content Analyst Company. I'm Mary Diojala, Conference Program Director, Information Today, Inc., where I work on the Enterprise Search and Discovery Conference and KM World. I will be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is entitled, The Future of KM. Now, before we get started, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the Submit button. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response to it within a few days. If you would like a copy of the presentation, you can download a PDF from the resource icon at the bottom of the console once the event is archived. And now, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today, who have two really unique views of the future from their separate vantage points. We'll start with John Chmay, Senior Practice Director, KM Strategy, Verint. And our second speaker will be Stephen Toole, who is Vice President, Marketing, Content Analyst Company. To review the speakers' bios, you can just click on the arrow under the speakers' photos. And now let's move into today's presentation. So let me welcome John Chmay, Senior Practice Director, KM Strategy at Verint. John, go ahead.
Thanks, Mary D. And hi, everybody. Thanks for attending today. I really appreciate it. That actually was the correct Polish pronunciation of my name, Chmay, or Chmay. I'm the Senior Practice Director of Knowledge Management at Verint, and I've been doing knowledge management, as you'll see, for a long time. The way I explain it to the younger generation is before there was an internet. And so that's pretty far back for a lot of people, but many folks on the call, I suspect, have been doing it for a long time as well. And you can appreciate the daunting task of predicting the future. I'll give it a shot. I think you'll find that I have one fundamental asset to predicting the future, and that is that I have been involved in knowledge management. I've had the privilege to be involved in knowledge management in business for quite some time. And so I thought what I would do is give you some of the past activities and tendencies I've seen, and then talk a little bit about where I see knowledge management headed, at least from the perspective of where we work at Verint and the kinds of work I do with my customers today. So let's take a trip in the Wayback Machine for a minute and talk a little bit about how this all evolved. So as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to be involved in doing knowledge management very early on. I got involved in taking calls in a call center back in the late 80s when customer support was just starting to become a big deal in the computing industry. Worked at Lotus back in the days of 123, if you remember that spreadsheet product. And at that time, I was fortunate that technology company had had a knowledge-based product, had a Boolean search tool, which was pretty snazzy in 1988. I had to make it on a high Sierra drive in a clean room, and we'd make these CDs, and we would mail them to everybody. That was our internet. We would send them out. And at that time, the idea of searching knowledge was really just sort of a snazzy techno thing, and it was really a simple Boolean search, and you kind of built your own index, and it was all sort of like rocket science to anybody that didn't know how to build the technology. But it had a lot of value. By 91, we were starting to see research in the universities, again, from my seat in being involved in a business context. I'm sure this has been going on in academia and the U.S. government and other places for a long time, but in the sort of the core support and service business where I work, it really was a snazzy thing to suddenly see these new tools and technologies come forward from academia. And we were fortunate at Lotus to do a partnership with the UMass Amherst, which had some cutting-edge probabilistic search, which at the time was really snazzy. Of course, everybody expects search to relevance rank content today, but back in the early 90s, that was sort of a big breakthrough that suddenly I could see the most important documents first. What a concept. And then in the mid-90s, we started to really put some horsepower into thinking about how we would access knowledge. And the first artificial intelligence and case-based reasoning tools came out. Again, from my view, they came into the support arena pretty early on. And for a lot of high-tech companies who had that kind of technology, because the internet was just coming online. And the idea was we were going to model the human mind. We're going to model how people think and help them guide them to the right answer by guessing what their needs were. And it was what I might call the age of knowledge engineering. And any of you who've been involved in that in the past, there's a lot of overhead required with that. You can get some pretty magical type results, but you really have to have a really strong model of how people are going to interact with the tool that's well-bounded for that to work well. So then, while that was going on from the mid-90s to 2000 or so as a mainstream activity, the Consortium for Service Innovation, at the time called the Customer Support Consortium, came into being. I happened to be living in Seattle and was actually the initial program manager for that organization and helped to build a lot of initial programs, including knowledge-centered support. I was actually the co-chair on that group for a couple of years, and we wrote the initial strategy there. And the idea was knowledge development was going to be king now. We're going to develop better information, and we're going to capture knowledge real time from the support agents. They talk to customers, all good stuff. But the idea was, knowledge was now going to come front and center. We're just going to engineer it. We're going to work from the author forward. By the late 90s, the Internet was mainstream. I mentioned I live in Seattle, so our joke here is you kind of always have to do a 2-year tour of duty at Microsoft if you're in high tech. So I did my 2-year tour in 99-2000, and I managed the support website, which was suddenly the real next frontier for all this stuff was, how do I get this in the mainstream of business? How do I get millions of hits a day? We did 15 languages at Microsoft. The kinds of things that are sort of taken for granted today were the first wave of these things of the early 2000s when large businesses were trying to extend the ability to do support and service through all these different channels. And so that was the beginning of that bit. Then CRM sort of took over the front and center of the business, at least in support and service. Customer relationship management is huge. The idea of being able to manage your customers' information and accounts was massive. And I worked for a couple of companies there that had knowledge sitting alongside the CRM, and there was sort of this sort of partnership, but not really a symbiosis yet. Until the last 10 years or so, I've been working with various companies, Kana, which is now part of Verint, where we're really trying to understand how to make an integrated service interaction environment. And I'll show you why that's so important, because that really drives some of my thinking about where the power is in the future. So my crystal ball says 3 things. I think rather than say there's going to be some new technology or capability, and there's lots of great stuff coming up, and Stephen's going to give you some really good information on what his organization's been up to about some really interesting knowledge development and categorization tools. But from my perspective, managing a services group that does knowledge management for a lot of large multinational companies, I see knowledge management finally and at last becoming a deep component of the business value proposition. It's always been used in business, but I'm seeing a future where there's a really fundamental partnership and integration the way people use knowledge to do their work. The first thing that we're going to see is context models, something that all of us who've been in KM a long time have been working with, metadata, schemas, and ontologies, and all sorts of great stuff. Well, this is really starting to take the fore and finally creating a much richer set of elements and attributes that can drive richer knowledge interactions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. In addition, the concept of knowledge and process have started to dissolve. Now that kind of sounds like either a really simple thing or a really abstract thing, but I'll try and talk a little bit more about that as well. But the idea is, while I'm working, what I need comes to me while I'm working as an artifact and product of what I'm doing, as opposed to me having some offline experience where I'm searching for something or going to go get something else that's related to the process I'm doing. The process and knowledge actually are married together in this ongoing dance that really provides the optimal information for me at any point. And again, I'm influenced by the fact that in support and service, I just want to point out that our spec for knowledge access is extremely tight. In a lot of these organizations, they have maybe 5, 10, 20,000 support agents. They're talking between 2 and 5 minutes per time with a customer. They've only got 60 to 120 seconds to find the right answer. So it is not a trivial business to find the exact information that a customer needs right in the context of the call and everything else going on. And we've all been on customer service calls where somebody's fumbling for information, or we don't feel like they're getting the best information to us, or we just downright know it's not correct. So this idea of knowledge and process working together is a really powerful and positive benefit to this support and service environment. And that's why I think we're going to see a real deep movement in that direction. As well, knowledge management metrics have been standing alongside of business for a long time. Those of us that have worked in the KM departments and KM products in our organizations, we have a good sense often of what measures we have around people using knowledge. But what we're starting to see now is something really exciting where knowledge is finally starting to integrate with other processes and benchmark metrics in an organization as a standard practice. I've seen some organizations that have done it great over the years, but now it's becoming more and more of a real requirement for organizations to be successful. So those are my 3 tickets to the future: context models, knowledge and process, and improved integrated metrics from knowledge management. Let's look a little bit more at how that works. Just a quick couple minutes on what this idea of support measures and support knowledge management means and how that's related to knowledge management. In the Verint world, we live in a world where we're really trying to help our customers and our customers' customers be successful while they're interacting and getting the services that they need. So what we care about are leveraging everything that's happening with the customer and everything we know about the customer and everything we know about our workforce to create smart moments, smart workforce, and an engaged workforce so that as we move through support interactions, we're building confidence, trust, loyalty, and success. Why is that important? Well, from a knowledge management standpoint, if you turn those into a cycle, I'm enriching my interactions with knowledge, I'm improving my processes and their symbiosis through knowledge, and I'm optimizing my workforce's capability, their ability to ramp up and use the right information on any channel that I might require. So hopefully you're starting to see that from a knowledge management standpoint, we have a very particular challenge in the support and service industry where we've got to find the right information, we've got to find it fast, we've got to make sure thousands of agents can use it properly, and we have to deliver it on every channel. Not a trivial challenge. Now, the benefits are huge. You can increase, just knocking a few seconds off of a call, average handle time can be massive for a large organization. Lowering risk and making higher confidence, better loyalty from customers, and of course, revenue and other opportunities to do service for customers. The last bit I'll give you for context here is this idea of lowering the handle time by rerouting use information to the right people, improving call quality and satisfaction by using the right knowledge, lowering the time to ramp people up. That's a big deal in organizations where they might be ramping thousands of agents up per year, increasing customer satisfaction through self-help and driving it across all the channels, and of course the things we all want to do in CAM, which is improving our quality and efficiency and turnaround time for knowledge, and having some sense of the business benefit of that through good metrics. All good stuff, but these are really powerful drivers of business benefit. And so our customers look directly to our products and services to provide that. From a knowledge management group, and I consider this group, your core practitioners here, this may seem relatively simple, but one of our challenges has been to try and keep it simple and clear to folks why they're doing knowledge management and what they're trying to do. They're not trying to dump all their content into the next repository and hope for the best. What they're trying to do is connect users to information, scope the right information so they only see what they need, evolve that content based on the right feedback and analytics, and evolve a culture that's really knowledge-centered and focused on knowledge sharing and engagement. Again, for those of us knowledge management practitioners, that's fairly straightforward, but it is a trend I've seen that the more we can explain this and tie it directly to the way organizations think about their business as a whole, the more successful we'll be. Okay, so now on to the future. What is this idea of these multiple context dimensions? Well, back in the day when I was building search tools, from the very beginning we always had categories and metadata and categorization and filtering. So what's different about that? Well, what I see happening now is the types of capabilities and the tools and products that are entering the marketplace are capable of processing and delivering a combination of metadata dimensions at the same time. And this is extremely powerful because from the standpoint of knowledge, if you type in a 2-word Google search query or Bing or whatever your search engine of choice, that's all well and good, but that really doesn't give a deep context about what's going on. We have one ace in the hole in the support and service world. We know who our customers are. We know their account information. We know the products they have. We know what types of things they've done with us before. We know where they're located. We know what their preferences are. Imagine all those dimensions working together to help to filter and scope the kind of information that people see. Incredibly powerful if you can pull it off, because what it means is you're achieving dynamic personalization for every user every time. And the customers can tell when the person is talking to them, oh, yes, I understand. Not only from a CRM perspective do I know who you are, I'm answering your question exactly as you're asking it with the type of information that you came for without any kind of a need to go offline or figure all this stuff out. It comes to me directly. Let me show you an example of this. This is an integrated desktop. This is the kind of enterprise product from Verint, and we're inside of a case management window, but there's some interesting things going on here. First of all, I can already see some of the customer context that I need. I can see the user's case information up here, what types of information they need, who they are. I can look at their account information, what kinds of products and services they have. So I'm already getting some information from the CRM console, including what recent support interactions they had. What have they asked about recently? What kinds of things do they tend to need? All of this can be processed as the support agent's working to scope these search results dynamically so that as they're working the case, and even as it changes, the right information is appearing to them in real time. Now this may, from a knowledge management standpoint, it's not rocket science per se. Now there's a great, there's a skill required to do this well. There's some capabilities you have to develop. But this is extremely powerful from a service delivery standpoint. It's a massive step forward because what it means is the support agent is working on the customer, focusing on the customer's needs, and the information is passing to them because we're dynamically passing all the right information to scope and tailor those results as they work. The next bit I talked about, in addition to context and embedding it in the process, the third future prediction, if you will, or trend that I was discussing was this idea of knowledge management metrics. And this is sort of a general slide. It's intended to be a bit provocative. Back in the day, and even in some organizations that I work with now, knowledge management tends to get siloed off as that content thing, if you will. But the savvy organizations are starting to look at knowledge management as a key indicator of what's happening in their business and also an enabler of some additional processes that may or may not exist on the service desk. You've got everything from process compliance information, quality metrics, customer feedback and experience. Knowledge management can inform the entire business, not just through trends of use, but also the types of information that are being required. When you have a good measurement approach and you can start to correlate that across other things happening in the business, knowledge suddenly comes front and center as an enabler of information that can help you understand how your business is going and where it needs to evolve. So this is an extremely popular and powerful trend that I expect to continue. And I think you can even visualize it as a maturity curve. Think of the original metrics that people do as sort of level one. What do people use? What content are they hitting? What searches do they have? All important foundational information. But now what organizations are starting to do is focus that in relation to their business impact. How is that impacting my quality and my compliance? It's actually really critical. You can get even further in and start looking at outcomes and experiences, what we call integrated metrics, where I can start to actually correlate what kind of a service outcome I had in terms of quality, efficiency, the agent's ability, the customer's perceived outcome, based on what's happening in the knowledge management environment. Now, to do that, you have to start pulling in other data like the CRM system, other quality systems that might lay on top of what you're doing, other transactional systems that you may be using. So it's not a trivial business. But if you can start to pull these things together, a really interesting thing can start to happen, what we call adaptive KM metrics. This is sort of the holy grail to me of turning this whole thing around, where you can start to predict in a meaningful way and not just sort of an arbitrary way what types of information the customer needs based on how the information is actually being used in the information evolving from the current session. So let's see how that might work. So this is the same picture I showed you earlier, but imagine that the customer's issue and their relationship is also augmented by information that we can provide on their history and their health. The idea of a health score being what kinds of interactions have they had before? What's their level of satisfaction? Is anything in the red? Is there an area where they've had problems? Is there an area where they're really highly satisfied and they might be a candidate for an upsell? Is there an area where we might need to focus on retention or some other offers that would really improve the situation? Combining that with this little journey map down here, which comes from other analytics we can layer into the experience, we start looking at how successful were previous interactions. What kinds of areas in our business as a whole do we know that we typically have strong or weak spots that the support agent is going to need to be aware of while they're talking to the customer to make them aware of the health score? And all of this dynamically drives the knowledge that appears. There might be additional knowledge that appears based on what the customer is asking right now in relation to what they've done before and their general sense of success with my organization. Now suddenly every agent becomes an expert and every moment becomes a smart moment where we start to work with the customer and they start to understand, geez, you guys really know my business. You know who I am. And knowledge becomes a partner in the process. Now, I'm not sure if folks were looking for, a sort of a crystal ball of the new technology features that exist. From my perspective, I've been at this 27 years. I think this is an exciting development. I think that all these things can work together to provide the type of information that really drives business. So in summary, from my perspective, we're creating the future by enriching, embedding, and extending knowledge into our business. Through dynamically evolving context models that are consumable in real time, knowledge-infused process where knowledge and process are partners in the successful interaction with our customers for whatever we're trying to do, and where we can start to get much deeper and predictive views of what kinds of information the customer or whoever we're working with needs while we're working. And all this means and comes together to say knowledge management has come of age as a core business competency. And more of my customers are starting to see it that way, and I'm very excited about this trend because I feel like knowledge management has finally got the seat it always should have had at the table as being a core component, a core asset to our business. So I'd value some chance to talk with you guys some more about it. We do everything from knowledge management assessments to health checks. We help with implementation, best practices. We have a metrics and measurement practice. We do all these things with our customers, whether they're employing technology or not. So I encourage you to reach out to me and have a chat and look me up, and let's talk some more about knowledge management. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was great. So much to think about there. Let me now turn it over to Stephen Toole, Vice President of Marketing for Content Analyst Company. Stephen.
Thank you very much, and thank you, John. That was a very good presentation as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about a slightly different direction, although certainly everything that John said is very valuable and valid. We're talking about the future of knowledge management being active and adaptive in a different way. We all know, of course, that knowledge is king, and that's why we're all here. And the key thing, as John talked about, is how do you get your knowledge workers to the right information? And as John took you through the history of knowledge management, many of you have built enterprise search systems, great meta tags, taxonomies, and you set your users loose on those, and you say, go look for whatever you want. Just use the right keywords and filters, and that ought to get you what you need. Maybe we'll send you some alerts if something new comes up. That all sounds pretty good, but some of the latest statistics indicate that there's still more room to improve there. Knowledge workers are spending 16% of their time searching. That's almost an entire day out of the week. And they're only finding what they need a little more than half the time, which means the other half the time they kind of give up. Another survey indicates that a little more than half of companies say that their search is really all that effective at all. And less than half indicate that metadata tags are actually effective. So we've come a long way in the last 20 years, as John had chronicled, but there's still room to improve. Another recent study kind of took a look at this and said, well, what did we do wrong? What happened along the way? One of the key things is lack of ongoing investment. You built these great taxonomies and metadata tags and things like that, but it needs to be constantly cared and fed for. Users change, needs change, terminology changes, etc. Good example was, search engines can adapt to this, but they're getting pounded by millions and millions of users every day. Internal search systems, not so much. And the second key thing was reinventing the wheel. A lot of folks built complex search systems from scratch instead of looking at what technologies are out there that we can use today off the shelf for our business needs. And the final indication of what might have gone wrong is that search only looks at part of the problem, that most enterprise search products try to rank information with respect to its relevance, but really if you put in a two-word text, keyword query, what makes item number 1,000 less relevant than item number 1 based on 2 words? There's so much more influence in determining relevance that just can't be obtained with a single or simple Boolean search frame. So just to sort of take things in a different direction, here's what we think the future looks like. We all go home at night from our jobs and we pull up Pandora and we say, hey Pandora, here's a couple songs I like, now go build me a radio station around that as indicators. and we ask our phones things in plain English, like, what's the score of the Redskins game, or what's the weather supposed to be like tomorrow? But then we go back to our jobs, and we're forced to put things into cryptic keyword searches and force things to, put into filtered searches and things like that. Same thing with Netflix. We go back to Netflix or Amazon, and they say, hey, welcome back. Here's some things that you probably would be interested in based on your previous patterns. This is actually an example of a competition that Netflix held a few years ago, recognizing how valuable the reviews were and needing a way to take that unstructured information of 100 million ratings of 17,000 movies by 500,000 users and use that information as an intelligent recommendation engine. This was a $1 million prize for the best technology that could come up with even just a 10% improvement in how that information was being used. And there were over 40,000 entries from around the world. The winner was a technology that was very, very similar to LSI, which is the technology that drives our solutions at Content Analyst Company. So that just proves that LSI technology is incredibly powerful and can outperform tens of thousands of other attempts to find relevant information hidden in unstructured content. And so just to make a little laundry list of what you need to shop for, you need a knowledge platform that builds on your current KM investment, keeps itself constantly updated, federated across all of your internal and external content sources, ranks relevance beyond just a couple of keywords, informs users when new information arises. Oh yeah, and that exists off the shelf, okay? So everybody's got their shopping list. Fortunately, no coincidence that our company has a product called Cerebrant that does all of that. It is a centralized knowledge platform for all of your unstructured information, internal and external content. And you can sort of think of it as the Pandora for unstructured content. You tell it a few things that you're interested in, and it finds for you things that are related to that if you're interested, whether it's internal content repositories or external content that you point it to specific sources. It's designed for your SMEs, your subject matter experts, to really be able to solve those tough business problems, because information, like we said, knowledge is king. If you had all the information in the world, you'd make perfect decisions every time. So the absence of making informed decisions is the right access to the right information. Unfortunately, we're limited by time and our ability to search and obtain the information we need to make the most informed decisions. So a tool that can bring you all of the key information you need, the most relevant information to make informed decisions using knowledge, much of which is in unstructured forms, can really empower your decision makers and your subject matter as experts. And technology is scalable to be able to process millions and millions of documents and pieces of content off the shelf very quickly. So this is sort of the view of Cerebrant. It's looking at all of your content repositories, your FileNet, your Documentum, SharePoint, through certified connectors, breaking down those barriers between your unstructured information, internal and external, as well as web content, premium content off the web feeds through patented deep web harvesting. And we talk about A3, active and adaptive analysts. What we really mean is being able to, first of all, built for your business work groups, not consumers. The beautiful thing is it automatically learns from the content it's analyzing. So there's no need to build word libraries, taxonomies, dictionaries, thesaurus, all that kind of stuff. It will learn from every piece of content that it's looking at. It will learn every term used in the context by the author of which it was written. Okay, so it's just basically a way to synthetically transfer the expert knowledge that's in the minds of all of your workers into the system. And it constantly learns from your user experiences and preferences. And its relevance beyond keywords, as John was talking about earlier, it's based on the context. So it can find those hidden relationships. This is technology that's been long used throughout the U.S. intelligence community to identify hidden relationships across vast amounts of unstructured content. So if you think about that use case in your enterprise, well, geez, we're not talking about national security or counterterrorism within our organization. We just want to know, what other proposals have we written that were similar to this one, or who in the organization has expertise in these certain areas, or even for succession planning, who would be a best candidate out of our 10,000 employees for this next position here. Let's look at any information that we have that those people have processed or been an expert in to identify that level of expertise. And like I said, it's based on LSI Plus, which is 11 years of enhancement and development on top of original LSI code. And it gives you the ability to, again, build on the meta tags and keyword search system that you already have in place. Keywords and meta tags are great if you know exactly what you're looking for and nothing else. And you don't want to see anything that doesn't have that exact spelling of that exact term. But that's not the reality we live in. The reality we live in is there's lots of ways to express concepts. And if you can get to the conceptual meaning behind a term, then you've taken it to a whole new level of relationship. This technology is proven, scalable, and effective. In-memory processing, it's handled billions of text objects in pretty much any language. So, probably wondering, can this be proven? Cerebrant is powered by our core engine, which is CAT, our OEM offering, and it's widely been deployed. I know there's some people on the call from the legal industry. We've got several hundred people on today's call. Legal, e-discovery, U.S. intelligence community, information services, talent management. There are many, many proven applications for this. This technology has been used in every courtroom in America as acceptable for identifying the most relevant content for a legal matter. It's totally scalable. One of our partners processed nearly a petabyte of information with the engine. And it was named the world's best semantic platform earlier this year by SIIA, which is the Software and Information Industry Association. And our friends at KMWorld have been kind enough to name this technology. It's the only product that has been a trend-setting product for 8 years. If you go back over the last 8 years, CAT has been on the trend-setting list every single year, and no other product has been on the list that long. So just to give you a few examples before we jump into Q&A, I know there's some friends of ours from the pharmaceutical industry on today's call. Thank you for joining us. But those of you that are struggling with regulatory intelligence or drug safety, pharmacovigilance, this is being used today by regulatory intelligence departments, overwhelmed with trying to keep up with all sorts of compliance regulations vis-a-vis their product safety and other factors. The Cerebrant solution automatically harvests that information, the FDA guidance documents from the global health authorities, and it notifies the regulatory intelligence staff whenever something comes up or changes that they should know about based on, again, informing the system. These are the kinds of systems, the kind of subjects that I'm interested in. Tell me if something comes up. Again, just like your Amazon, just like your Netflix, just like your Pandora, bringing you new information as it becomes available. And the net result is it reduces compliance risks, labor costs, and helps increase productivity. Getting back to that 16% of their time searching, if you can reduce that by bringing the information to them, people can be a lot more productive. In legal, there's a term called predictive coding, which is meant to use this technology, this latent semantic technology, to identify the most relevant legal documents for a matter. And in one such case, a Fortune 100 financial services company, I know there's many Fortune 100 financial services companies on today's call, had to call through nearly 5 terabytes of data, over 5 million records, to identify what records are relevant to this case, and using this predictive coding technology powered by our engine was able to reduce that down, find the 90 gigs of records out of that 5 terabytes that they needed to review in order to present their case. This would have cost them over $1.5 million had they not had this technology to identify what information was relevant to the case. And the third and final example I'll share with you is in resume matching. I know there's some talent management companies on the call today as well, some of which we're working with right now. One such company, a Fortune 500, was getting 500,000 resumes a year for their 2,500 job openings, and used this technology to semantically match the job description to the resumes and have the system bring to those recruiters newly matching resumes that were related to the job description as they were brought into the system, their applicant tracking system. This enabled them to cut over 3 days off response time, which gave them a significant competitive advantage in reducing their time to fill and their cost per hire. And the beautiful thing is that because the system learns from the content itself, is able to overcome term ambiguity and identify really the key skills in the resumes and job descriptions that need to be matched. So rather than trying to write Boolean keyword strings, this company was able to just take the job description and feed it into the system and say, semantically match this job description to the resumes that are the most relevant to the entirety of this job description as compared to the entirety of the resume. And there's just a few examples there. Again, proven by many high-scale customers. Some of you are on this call today. In the government, in the private sector, in e-discovery, in information services, in talent management, and of course throughout the U.S. intelligence community. So just in summary before we get into Q&A, we believe that the future builds on the success, the initial success of your KM systems, and that it brings that content to you through active and adaptive processing, learns from the content itself and the user behavior, and brings more relevant information to your knowledge workers, whether they're in customer service, contract management, recruiting, regulatory intelligence, scientific research, it doesn't matter. They all need access to the most relevant information across your internal and external libraries. And finally, it's proven and scalable. It's available as a SaaS solution with our Cerebrant tool or as an OEM SDK through our CAT tool directly. And we encourage you to visit our site, check out some of our awards for the technology. We've got live demos on our, recorded demos on our website, and we'll be glad to set up a live demonstration and maybe even use some of your own content to show you how it would work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Lots of things to think about there, too. So thanks to both of you. And now let's move on to some of the questions that we have from our listening audience here. Let's start with this one to the both of you. How do the panelists view the differences between knowledge management, content strategy, and customer experience management? John, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think that the way that I think about this is fairly straightforward. So I look at the concept of content and knowledge management as being symbiotic, but that there are different objectives for people doing content management versus knowledge management, at least in the support and service domain where I work. The way we think of content management has to do with I need the right information, I need it up to date, I need it high quality, and the back of a business, if you will, say a bank or insurance company or healthcare, any organization that creates policies and procedures that have to be complete and compliant, they have to focus on content strategy or content management. Knowledge management, to me, is the act of getting the right information at that moment in time. A little bit of what Stephen was talking about, it doesn't matter what my content is. What matters is that I get the right information in front of me given the context of what I need. And then finally, customer experience management is really an overall umbrella of how that experience plays out with everything else that has to happen in the domain while I'm working. So to me, content management can be an enabler of knowledge management because it creates the right context of information, but knowledge management takes a step further to format or otherwise process that information and then CRM, or customer engagement management in this example, is the larger umbrella task that gets satisfied through those activities.
Stephen?
We look at unstructured content as fairly uniform. Our engine is able to process unstructured content regardless of what type of content it is, whether it's customer experience or research or external web content. And so, the beauty is it's very flexible in that regard and can provide the subject matter experts with the knowledge and information that they need most to do their jobs.
So to some extent, the three are interrelated.
Yes.
Okay. Here's another one. Given the changes that have already occurred and those that are emerging, what impact do you see on the nature of the workforces and the shift in the portfolio of skills that will be needed both in IT and in the larger environment? So a slightly different way of looking at the future from what you guys have talked about.
Well, this is an interesting question. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen, because I think we might have different perspectives on this. This is an interesting conversation.
Well, good. Stephen, go ahead.
John, I'm going to let you take that one.
All right.
Well,
John,
it occurred to me that one of the things that you were talking about, Stephen, was the idea of the whole competency you just described around processing information and automating the view for context to deliver to people. Maybe we actually have some synergy here, because the question was around how do we see roles changing in the workforce and competencies changing as these knowledge tools become more sophisticated. Again, from the standpoint of advancement of technology, I think a general answer I would give to that is that as the technology becomes more facile and richer in delivering the types of experiences that users are looking for, ideally you can start to train and hire people with the competency to know how to process information and use it properly. Because, I mean, both of us are talking about ways in which we're going to see better information arriving at people's desktop, but it doesn't do anything for you unless you really know how to use it. The big trend we're seeing is the push toward really improving people's time to competency in whatever job they're doing and leveraging knowledge management to turn them from information memorizers and people that have to know how to find things to people that actually are focused on how to use the tools at hand to find the best information at the moment. And so from my perspective, that's how the competencies start to change. We're seeing that, for example, in training environments now. They're moving from just trying to give you a 2-month training sometime where they train you everything about the business and hope that the calls come in once you get on the floor about that, to I'm going to train you in 4 weeks or even less about how to use the knowledge tools you have at your disposal, because we've built enough capability now that you can focus on doing your job, which includes a high competency at finding the right information using the advanced tools and not just memorizing everything. So that's, to me, how the things are evolving in general. The better the tools get, the more the users can focus on using the information and not finding it.
To his question about skills, do you think companies are requiring different skills and will require different skills in the future? And how do people prepare for that?
I'm conditioned to answer this question from where I sit on the bus, right, because I sit in those organizations with 10, 20,000 agents, or sometimes they have agents in 10 different countries. And so their challenge isn't so much having the skill set as being able to hire a broader set of people to do a higher skill job. So from my perspective, the answer is I can get people with a lower fundamental skill set who I can frankly maybe pay a little bit less, who can do a really good job because the right information is right at their fingertips, as opposed to having to hire someone who has a deep competency in how to construct information from the various random sources they might get from an inferior knowledge delivery tool.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing with the companies we work with that are telling us that they're leveraging our technology to be able to perform a similar task today, but using people that, as John said, don't require the same level of skill, don't require the same level of knowledge, expertise, and therefore can get the job done at a lower rate. We're seeing that in talent management. We've seen it in patent research, where previously high-paid patent attorneys had to be used to search patents because they were the subject matter experts and could understand the nuances. But if you can synthetically transfer that knowledge to a system and give access to that system by somebody that maybe just doesn't have that same level of knowledge and expertise and education, you're putting the technology to work for you, and that doesn't make the higher educated and skilled person redundant. It makes them more productive.
Let me give you an example that's happening right now. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
For example, all the retail companies that are in our portfolio of customers are ramping up for the holidays right now, right? They're getting ready to rock and roll. They're going to double, triple, quadruple their support force because all of us are going to be calling them with questions about the stuff we want to buy or the stuff we got for the various holidays. And so they've got to find these people who can answer questions in a matter of days once they've been hired and across the broad spectrum of all the products and services. So there's a lot of it's not just a matter of getting cheap labor. I don't think we're trying to say that. We're just saying it's a matter of how fast can I ramp somebody up to really answer the types of questions they're going to get in a very short time period and get on about it that quickly.
So it's really going to be a different environment.
I think it's the idea of expanding and deepening people's competency. I think Steve and I are talking about the same thing here. It's like the neat thing is we're by necessity, where we work, we're under the covers in the back end of this thing, seeing how it's going to be the driving engine of improvement. But the front end is going to start to look a lot more elegant and responsive to the user, right? And that's going to be really powerful because it changes the whole nature of the way they think about finding knowledge from a disassociated, complex, risky business to something that's a seamless, integrated part of doing their job.
We're going back into history here. I've got one question since we got a few history lessons here during both your presentations. In the early days of knowledge management, one of the biggest problems faced by the practice and almost killed it was how totally the technology vendors hijacked the term. Do you see this happening again? And if so, what does that say for the future of the broader domain? Which of you would like to tackle that one first?
Well, I feel like I've been taking the first whack. I don't know, Stephen, if you have any comment on that one, I can comment as well.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, I actually agree with this. I agree that knowledge management was hijacked by technology vendors. I worked for 9 companies in this space, and I was part of that. My joke used to be, I used to work the trade show booths like many of us have, and I'd sit there in the late 90s. Knowledge management was going to save the world, and I was working with these various technology vendors, and we got on the booth, and everybody's excited. Then CRM showed up, and knowledge management was dead. And then the questioner said, CAM is dead. Oh, my God, it under-delivered. It's going to change our company, and it never did, and I don't know what happened. Then I had to hide in the back of the booth. Now, in the last 5 years to 10 years, I've been able to get back in the front of the booth again. Now, why is that? And I think it's the answer to this question. Do I see technology vendors hijacking the term? Let me answer that question by saying what I'm seeing, and I'm the head of the services group that does knowledge management for Verint. I talk to all our customers in this regard. What I see is finally a leavened and balanced understanding of what knowledge management is and isn't. It's not the panacea that's going to take all your stuff and make your business better without you having to do anything because of the technology. Neither is it this massive, complicated, monolithic thing that scares the heck out of a lot of people. I think it's a balanced view by the customers, by businesses themselves, that knowledge management is a business competency. That is what I think is changing, and that's what I think the questioner is pointing up, that it's not a technology. My tagline is knowledge management is a lifestyle, right? It's a way of thinking about my information, right? So from my point of view, the more people are starting to understand business competency in knowledge management, the better off it's going to be, and the less vendors are going to be interpreting for customers what they think that means. And I will tell you quite directly, my customers are much more savvy in the last 5 years about what they want from their CAM tools than they were. And so we can't get away with as much of that sort of telling them what it is.
Very interesting. Stephen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would just, I echo John's remarks and just add on to that consumerization is certainly making knowledge management cool again because of the innovations in consumer applications and products and mobile technologies and things like that, that you're going to start to see a lot more of that translate into the enterprise and applied to knowledge management much more than we've ever seen before.
We have one question here about Europe, but I'd actually like to expand that a little bit and ask both of you if you see differences from one part of the world to another.
I mean, I can take that. So, one of the things that makes LSI technology compelling is it's language agnostic. And in the case of Europe, where there's so many different languages in a very dense geographic area, language differences do play a much bigger part than other parts of the world, certainly here in the U.S. So when building a knowledge management system, it needs to be able to handle the language differences. And so Europe is certainly a great example of that environment where a solution that's language agnostic that can learn from the content in any language is really critical.
And I would just add that that there is a cultural focus, in my experience, with our products, our CAM products in the UK particularly. I don't have to have as much of a haggle as for the previous question about what knowledge management is. I tend to get along fairly well with the thought process around why knowledge management is a core business component of business capability, as I said earlier, in the UK particularly. And then, as Stephen mentioned, there are these multinational organizations. We've got some with 20 or 22 languages where it really does get complicated. But after a certain point, as much of the complexity there is around just managing a business through that, right? If I've got one source of the truth and I need to propagate it out to different languages and map that across all the different users that might have it, that's where that context model I mentioned really becomes powerful, where I can contextualize who gets to see exactly what content based on what product they support, their level of expertise, what language they're in, what business unit they're in, and which customers are going to talk. That's where you get this future.
Sounds like a big. Sounds like it's a complex thought process.
We're building the future by necessity, not design. Right? So that's the way the world is going.
Great. John, you were talking about multiple dimensions of context, and how do those work together to filter down to relevant content? Where does metadata come into this?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and I got to be. I want to appreciate that. I don't want to give a trivial answer to this audience, because this is, I have to assume, we presented a CAM world, and I've met a lot of the folks in this community, and there's a lot of people doing really sophisticated things with metadata, with massive attribute libraries and lots of ontologies and multiple taxonomies. Our stuff is relatively lightweight by comparison. The challenge in our business is to be able to accurately model the information that I just described, to be able to model a business process, right? I don't disagree with Stephen's assertion that metadata has sort of a limitation of maintenance, and I experienced that quite keenly. So our sweet spot is to try to figure out what's the basic framework of these dimensions that I need to model that'll get me where I want to go. And I give a very simple example of this. You don't need a lot of dimensions of information to get you to quite accurate information. If I say ocean liner, 1912, iceberg, we all know what I'm talking about. So, right? You don't need a whole, but the trick is, how do I model these attributes in such a way that they accomplish two fundamental tasks? A, they properly model the business, but just as importantly, B, they model the way in which users and customers might want to see this information tagged and interacted with. And that's what makes the support and service taxonomy a little bit unique. We tend to pare it back a little bit. The library scientist in me and among us in the group gets a little uncomfortable sometimes with how generalized some of this might look, but the power is in the combination. Like I just said, I said three very simple terms that might be in a very simple taxonomy, but the combination of those three. So if I know what product you use, I know what type of account you have, I know the question you're asking, and I know a little bit about some particular business attribute of your situation, like billing or whatever the thing is that's going on for you. I know quite a bit. The trick is to map that to the evolving process and then to the content so that it comes forward. So my view is the power comes from the combination and the intersection of multiple metadata attributes in a simple and direct way that is manageable, not exotic, massive, deep taxonomies, because in our domain that just is not something, as I said in a 2-minute call, anyone's going to want to or try to navigate.
Yeah.
And if I
Stephen,
could
do you have
just
any
build on
comments?
that. Yeah, if I could just build on that, the example that John gave with ocean liner, iceberg, 1912 is really a great example for context-aware technology, because you might the word ocean liner might not appear in a piece of content, right, about the Titanic. It might say ship, boat. It might not actually say ocean liner, and your taxonomy might not actually have the word ocean liner in it in metadata. But as humans, we all understood the context of that with those three terms together, and that's really the beauty of LSI-based technology, is that it also understands the context of those three terms and their co-occurrence, and can therefore produce a piece of content about the Titanic, even if it doesn't have any of those three terms in it, quite frankly, right? You could read an excerpt of text talking about, the Titanic went down in the North Sea, in the earlier part of the 1900s. Nothing in what I just said had any of those three terms in it, right? But it's the concept, and LSI is able to identify those fifth-order relationships between the three terms that John said and the body of text that I just read out to you or cited to you. And that's the beauty of concept-aware LSI-based technology.
I mean, I would say my summary of what our talk today has been about might be, I don't know if you would think of it this way, Stephen, is we already have all the information we need to make the right decisions and find the information we want, whether it's implicit in the data that we've written, as Stephen just mentioned, whether it's in the trail of information about the customer and the service interaction as I described. I think what we're saying is the future is going to be more about not trying to model what needs to happen, but taking what's already been written, what's already known, what's already been modeled, what's already happening in the service domain, and leveraging that forward so that we can do business in an effective way without having to try and remodel the universe.
That's a terrific summation, John. And your timing is perfect because we are, in fact, out of time. So it is all the time we have for questions. We're sorry if we did not get to your question, but if you asked a question that we did not answer, you can be sure that the questions will be answered via email. So I would like to thank both our speakers today, both John and Stephen. And if you would like to review this event or send it to a colleague, please use the same URL that you used for today's event, and the webinar will be archived for 90 days. Plus, you will receive an email tomorrow with the URL to view the archive. So thank you all for participating in today's event. We are apparently auctioning off a Chromecast, so the winner will be announced on November 30th. So go to kmworld.com to see if you are a winner. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks again to John and Stephen.
Thank you.
See you all in the future.
All right. Have a great day.